Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. Manhattan, the Plaza Hotel. The Dom Perignon champagne bubbled in the crystal flute like tiny liquid diamonds, and Emily Carter watched each bubble with the attention of someone who couldn't afford to waste a single drop. 25 years old, MBA from NYU, serving drinks at corporate events because Wall Street decided her credentials were worth less than the connections she didn't have. "More champagne, sir?" she asked with the professional smile she'd learned to use as armor. The man didn't even look up from his iPhone. Hair perfectly tousled on purpose, Armani suit that cost more than her 6-month salary, and that air of superiority that seemed to come standard with trust funds. Was his eloquent response. Emily sighed internally and filled the flute, resisting the urge to accidentally spill the champagne on his Hermes tie. The Plaza's grand ballroom buzzed with Manhattan's elite. It was the launch of Grayson Enterprises' new hotel division, and all the sharks were here, sniffing for opportunities. A shrill voice cut through the air like nails on a chalkboard. Emily saw the champagne man, Ethan Grayson, stiffen as if hit by lightning. A platinum blonde, all Botox and designer labels, marched toward his table with the determination of a heat-seeking missile. "I thought you said you were bringing your fiancé tonight, Ethan," Sophia Langley said. Emily recognized the socialite from page 6. She slammed her red acrylic nails on the table. "My father is here, Ethan. Here, waiting to meet this mysterious woman who finally managed to snag Manhattan's most eligible bachelor." Ethan ran his hand through his hair, and Emily noticed he was sweating. The man who seemed made of ice and arrogance was actually melting. "Sophia." "Listen," he began. "Don't give me excuses." She stomped her Louboutin heel on the marble floor. "You told me last week you were engaged. The entire Upper East Side is talking about it. Where is she?" Emily should have walked away, should have pretended she wasn't eavesdropping on their private conversation, should have gone to fill other glasses at other tables. But she couldn't. Maybe it was the way Ethan Grayson, yes, she finally connected the name to the face from Forbes magazine's looked like a cornered animal. Or maybe it was the malicious satisfaction of seeing one of New York's most powerful men being publicly humiliated. Ethan looked desperately around the ballroom, as if salvation would materialize from thin air. His blue eyes swept the crowd of expensive suits and designer gowns until they landed on her. Emily felt like time froze. Those blue eyes, blue like the ocean in the Hamptons, fixed on her with an intensity that made her stomach do somersaults. "That one," Ethan said, pointing directly at her as if she were an item in a display window, "is my fiancé." The champagne slipped from Emily's hand and shattered on the floor in 1,000 glittering pieces. The entire ballroom fell silent. Sophia turned to look at Emily as if she were a particularly disgusting bug that had crawled into the plaza. "That? Waitress?" Emily felt blood rush to her face. Waitress. As if it were the lowest thing in the world, as if serving people to make a living was shameful. "She's not a waitress," Ethan said, rising from his table with fluid movements. "Emily works in corporate events, strategic consulting." Emily blinked. How on earth did he know her name? Then she remembered. Name tag. Of course. Strategic consulting? Sophia repeated with the tone of someone who'd just swallowed something sour. How interesting. Ethan walked over to Emily, and she realized how tall he was, at least 6'2". Easily, he stopped right in front of her, so close she could smell his expensive cologne mixed with a hint of desperation. "Darling," he said, and his voice had that intimate tone that should be reserved for people who actually knew each other. "Sorry, I'm late. Midtown traffic, you know how it island." Emily stared at him, completely lost. What the heck was happening? She began. "You're nervous," Ethan interrupted gently, placing his hand on her arm. "It's understandable. First time meeting Sophia." Emily looked at Sophia, who was studying her like a scientist examining bacteria. Then she looked back at Ethan, who was staring at her with an expression that clearly said, "Please, for the love of all that's good, don't leave me hanging." And then, maybe it was the injustice of being called a waitress with contempt. Maybe it was the opportunity to see Manhattan's most arrogant man begging for help. Or maybe it was simply because her life was already a mess anyway. Emily decided to dive headfirst into the abyss. "Hi, honey," she said, forcing a sweet smile and placing her hand on his chest. Sorry about the champagne. You still make me nervous after all this time." The relief that crossed Ethan's face was almost comical. Sophia watched them for a long moment, her eyes narrowing like a snake ready to strike. "Well," she said finally, "how romantic." Emily had the feeling she'd just jumped out of a plane without a parachute, but at least it would be an interesting fall. The Plaza Hotel. Moments later, Emily's heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird trying to escape. What had she just done? She was standing in the middle of Manhattan's most exclusive event, pretending to be engaged to a man whose net worth probably exceeded the GDP of small countries, while Sophia Langley circled them like a vulture sensing weakness. "So," Sophia said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "how long have you two been together? I'm surprised Ethan never mentioned you before last week." Emily felt Ethan's hand tighten slightly on her arm. A warning? Or was he as terrified as she was? "We've been private about our relationship," Ethan said smoothly, but Emily caught the slight tremor in his voice. "You know how the press can be." Sophia's laugh was like broken glass. "Oh, I do indeed, but surely you can tell us how you met. It must be quite a story." Emily's mind went completely blank. How did millionaires meet their partners? Country clubs, charity galas, private islands? She had no idea. Her longest relationship had been with Ryan from her college statistics class. And they'd met when he'd asked to borrow her calculator. "We met at—" Emily started, then stopped. Ethan squeezed her arm again. "At Columbia," Ethan finished smoothly. "Emily was getting her MBA while I was doing a guest lecture series for the business school." Emily blinked. That was actually believable, and explained how she might have corporate event experience. "How romantic," Sophia purred. "A professor, student romance. Guest lecturer," Ethan corrected quickly. And it was after the semester ended, very professional. Emily found herself oddly impressed by his quick thinking. Maybe there was more to Ethan Grayson than just money and arrogance. "And the proposal?" Sophia pressed. "I simply must hear about the proposal." This time, Emily jumped in before Ethan could speak. If she was going to crash and burn, she might as well make it spectacular. "It was actually quite simple," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Nothing flashy. Ethan knows I'm not really the type for grand gestures in public." Ethan looked at her with something that might have been admiration. "Emily doesn't like being the center of attention." "How refreshing," Sophia said. And Emily couldn't tell if she was being sarcastic or not. So different from most women in Ethan's orbit. Before anyone could respond, a man with silver hair and a smile that could sell ice to penguins approached their group. Emily recognized him immediately. Charles Langley, Sophia's father, and one of New York's most influential real estate moguls. "Ethan!" Charles boomed, clapping Ethan on the shoulder with the familiarity of old money connections. "I hear congratulations are in order, Mr. Langley," Ethan replied, and Emily noticed how his posture straightened. This was clearly someone whose opinion mattered. "I'd like you to meet my fiancée, Emily Carter." Emily extended her hand, grateful for the etiquette classes her grandmother had insisted on when she was 12. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Langley." Charles shook her hand with the firm grip of someone who'd closed billion-dollar deals with a handshake. "The pleasure is mine, my dear. I must say, Ethan has excellent taste, and you're quite different from his usual, what shall we call them, companions." Sophia's eyes flashed dangerously. "Daddy!" "Now, Sophia, don't be rude," Charles chuckled. "I'm simply saying it's refreshing to see Ethan with someone who seems to have substance beyond their trust fund." Emily felt heat rise in her cheeks. She wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an insult, but Ethan's slight smile suggested she should take it as the former. "Emily has an MBA from Inu," Ethan said proudly, as if he'd actually had something to do with her education. "She specializes in corporate restructuring and event management." That was close enough to the truth, Emily supposed. She did manage events, just not in the way Charles Langley probably imagined. "Impressive." Charles nodded approvingly. "And what do your parents do, Emily?" Emily's stomach dropped. This was where her carefully constructed facade would crumble. Her father was a mechanic in Queens, and her mother worked part-time at a local diner. Good, honest work, but not exactly the background that would impress Manhattan's elite. "My parents are both retired," she said carefully. It wasn't exactly a lie. Her father had been forced into early retirement after his back injury, and her mother had cut back her hours to help care for him. Retired from what field? Sophia asked sweetly, clearly sensing weakness. Emily's mind raced. What would sound impressive but not too specific? Consulting, she said finally. Business consulting. Ethan nodded as if this made perfect sense. That's actually how Emily got interested in corporate events family business. Charles beamed. Excellent. Nothing like keeping business in the family. You'll have to bring them to the wedding, of course. Wedding. The word hit Emily like a cold slap. Of course, there would need to be talk of a wedding. Engaged couples planned weddings. How had she not thought of that? We're still in the early planning stages, Ethan said quickly. Emily wants something intimate, family and close friends only. Smart girl, Charles approved. These society weddings get out of hand quickly. Speaking of which, when can Eleanor and I expect to meet your parents, my dear? Emily felt trapped. She couldn't exactly invite Charles and Eleanor Langley to her parents' cramped apartment in Queens, where the highlight of entertainment was her father's collection of vintage car magazines and her mother's soaps playing on their ancient television. Soon, she managed. They're traveling right now, extended cruise. How lovely, Sophia said. Where to? Europe, Emily said quickly, then immediately regretted being so vague. Mediterranean. Which cruise line? Sophia pressed. Eleanor and I love cruising. We were just on the Regent Seven Seas last month. Emily had no idea what cruise lines rich people used. She'd never been on a cruise in her life. The fanciest vacation her family had ever taken was a long weekend at Lake George when she was 15. It's a private yacht. Ethan interjected smoothly. Emily's family prefers more intimate settings. Charles's eyebrows rose appreciatively. Even better. Nothing beats the privacy of your own vessel. Emily shot Ethan a grateful look, but inside she was panicking. This was getting more complicated by the minute. Now she apparently came from a family wealthy enough to own yachts and take months-long European cruises. Well, Sophia said, her smile sharp as a blade, I simply cannot wait to meet them when they return. We simply must have you both over for dinner soon. This weekend, perhaps. Emily's mouth went dry. Dinner at the Langleys? She'd rather walk barefoot over broken glass. This weekend might be tricky, Ethan said. We have plans. Oh? Sophia's eyebrows arched. What sort of plans? Emily could practically see Ethan's mind working frantically behind his blue eyes. We're going to the Hamptons, he said finally. Emily hasn't seen the house yet. The house? Of course, Ethan Grayson had a house in the Hamptons, probably a mansion with staff, and Emily would be expected to know how to act like she belonged there. She was so far out of her depth, she might as well have been drowning in the Mariana Trench. How wonderful, Charles exclaimed. Which part of the Hamptons? We have a place in East Hampton ourselves. Montauk, Ethan replied. Emily loves the lighthouse. Emily had never been to Montauk in her life, but she nodded and smiled as if lighthouse gazing was her favorite hobby. Perfect, Sophia said, her smile never wavering. Then dinner next weekend. I'll have Eleanor call you to arrange it. And with that, Sophia linked her arm through her father's and swept away, leaving Emily and Ethan standing alone in the middle of the ballroom, both of them apparently committed to maintaining this charade for at least another week. Ethan turned to look at Emily, his expression unreadable. Well, he said quietly, I think that went well. Emily stared at him in disbelief. Well? Well, I just agreed to have dinner with people who probably eat with more forks than I own. I supposedly come from a family rich enough to own yachts, and I'm apparently spending the weekend at your Hamptons house looking at lighthouses. Ethan had the audacity to look amused. You're a surprisingly good improviser. This isn't funny, Emily hissed, keeping her voice low. I'm a fraud. I don't know anything about your world. I don't even know what wine goes with fish. White, Ethan said helpfully. Emily glared at him. That's not the point. Ethan studied her for a moment, his expression growing more serious. Look, I know this is crazy, but you just saved me from the most humiliating moment of my professional life. Sophia's father controls 3 major hotel chains on the East Coast. If he'd walked away thinking I was a liar who couldn't even produce a fiancé. Why did you lie in the first place? Emily demanded. Ethan ran his hand through his hair, messing up the perfect styling. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked almost human. Because Sophia has been trying to get me to marry her for 2 years, and her father has been pressuring his business partners to pressure me. I thought if I said I was engaged, they'd back off. I never imagined Sophia would show up here tonight. Emily softened slightly. She understood feeling trapped by other people's expectations, even if the scale was completely different. So, what happens now? She asked. Ethan looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Now, Emily Carter, you and I are going to have to figure out how to convince some of the most suspicious people in New York that we're madly in love. Emily's stomach flipped. For how long? Long enough for me to close the Langley deal and figure out a way to end this without destroying both our reputations. Emily looked around the glittering ballroom, at the chandeliers that cost more than her annual rent, at the people who lived in a world she'd only ever seen in magazines. I must be out of my mind, she muttered. Ethan's smile was surprisingly warm. Probably, but if it helps, I'll make sure you're well compensated for your time. Emily bristled. I'm not a prostitute. That's not what I meant, Ethan said quickly. I meant this is going to require you to take time off work, buy appropriate clothes, learn about my background. I'll cover all expenses, plus pay you for your time. Think of it as method acting. Emily stared at him. A part of her wanted to walk away right now, to go back to her normal life of serving champagne to people who barely acknowledged her existence. But another part of her, a part she didn't entirely recognize, was intrigued. When would she ever get another chance to see how the other half lived? To wear designer clothes and eat at restaurants she couldn't pronounce the names of. And if she was being completely honest with herself, there was something about Ethan Grayson that intrigued her. Beneath the arrogance and the perfect facade, she'd glimpsed something vulnerable, something real. One weekend, she said finally. I'll do this weekend in the Hamptons and the dinner with the Langleys. After that, we figure out how to end this cleanly. Ethan's relief was visible. Deal. They shook hands, and Emily tried to ignore the little electric shock she felt when their palms touched. So, she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt, when do I get my crash course in being your fake fiancé? Ethan's grin was almost boyish. How's tomorrow morning sound? I'll pick you up at 8. 8 inches the morning? Emily squeaked. Welcome to my world, darling, Ethan said, and for the first time, the endearment sounded almost genuine. We have a lot of work to do. Emily's apartment, Upper West Side, 7:45 a.m. Emily stared at her closet, as if it had personally offended her. Hanging before her was the entire sum of her professional wardrobe. 2 blazers from Target, 3 blouses that had seen better days, 1 black dress that did double duty for interviews and funerals, and a collection of pants that ranged from acceptable to, pray nobody looks too closely. How exactly did one dress to learn how to be a fake billionaire's fiancé? Her phone buzzed with a text. Downstairs. Black Tesla. Emily's stomach lurched. Of course, he drove a Tesla, probably the most expensive model they made. She grabbed her purse, a fake Coach bag she'd bought from a street vendor, and headed downstairs, her heart hammering with each step. The Tesla was impossible to miss, sleek and silent, like some predatory animal. Ethan stood beside it, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread for men who own small countries. Dark jeans that probably cost more than her rent, a casual button-down that somehow looked both relaxed and expensive, and sunglasses that screamed Italian craftsmanship. Good morning, he said, opening the passenger door for her. Sleep well? Emily snorted. Are you kidding? I spent half the night Googling how to pretend to be rich, and the other half practicing different ways to say yacht without sounding like I've never seen one. Ethan's laugh was genuine, and Emily noticed how it transformed his entire face. And what did you learn? That I'm doomed, Emily said, sliding into the car. The interior was all leather and technology, with more buttons and screens than a spaceship. Also, apparently wealthy people call them vessels, not boats. Good to know you're a quick study, Ethan said, getting behind the wheel. Where we're going should help with the rest. Where exactly are we going? Shopping. Emily's blood pressure spiked. I told you I'm not comfortable with you buying me clothes. I can handle my own. Emily. Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. Look, I know this is awkward, but if you show up to dinner at the Langleys wearing, well, What you're wearing now, they'll know something's up in about 30 seconds. Emily looked down at her outfit, black pants from Kohl's and a blue blouse that had been her interview uniform for 2 years. She felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and something that might have been anger. What's wrong with what I'm wearing? Ethan seemed to realize he'd stepped into dangerous territory. Nothing's wrong with it. You look lovely. But Sophia has the fashion sense of a bloodhound. She'll spot a non-designer label from across the room, and she'll use it to try to tear you apart. Emily was quiet for a moment. She hated that he was right. She hated that clothes mattered so much in his world. But most of all, she hated that she cared what Sophia Langley thought of her. Fine, she said finally, but I'm paying you back every penny. We'll discuss that later, Ethan said diplomatically, which Emily took to mean not happening. 20 minutes later, they pulled up in front of Bergdorf Goodman. Emily had walked past the legendary department store dozens of times, but she'd never actually been inside. The window displays alone probably cost more than her education. This place looks expensive, she said weakly. It is, Ethan replied cheerfully. But think of it as an investment in our mutual survival. Inside, Bergdorf's was like entering another dimension. Everything was pristine, elegant, and intimidating. The salespeople looked like they moonlighted as supermodels, and Emily was pretty sure the handbag display near the entrance cost more than some people's cars. Mr. Grayson, a tall, impeccably dressed woman, glided toward them like she was floating. What a lovely surprise. How can we help you today? Hello, Victoria, Ethan replied smoothly. I'd like you to meet my fiancée, Emily Carter. We need to put together a complete wardrobe for her. Country casual, business elegant, and formal evening wear. Victoria's eyes lit up like she'd just won the lottery. Of course, Miss Carter. You have such lovely bone structure. We're going to have fun with this. For the next 3 hours, Emily felt like a very expensive dress-up doll. Victoria and her team of assistants brought out outfit after outfit, each more beautiful and terrifying than the last. There were cashmere sweaters that felt like clouds, silk blouses that caught the light like water, and shoes that were basically works of art for your feet. This Valentino dress would be perfect for dinner parties, Victoria said, holding up something that looked like it belonged in a museum. And these Manolo Blahniks? How much does this dress cost? Emily interrupted. Victoria glanced at Ethan, who shook his head slightly. Let's focus on fit and style for now, Victoria said diplomatically. Emily tried on what felt like half the store. Ethan sat in a plush chair outside the dressing room, occasionally offering opinions when Victoria asked for them. Emily noticed he had good taste. He seemed to prefer the simpler, more classic pieces over the flashier options. What about this one? Victoria asked as Emily emerged in a navy blue cocktail dress that somehow made her feel both elegant and comfortable. Ethan looked up from his phone, and Emily saw something flicker in his eyes. That's perfect, he said quietly. Emily looked at herself in the three-way mirror. The dress fit like it had been made for her, skimming her curves without being too tight, hitting just above her knees at the perfect length. She barely recognized herself. We'll take it, Ethan said. Ethan, Emily started to protest. We'll take everything she tried on that fit well. Ethan continued, ignoring her. And we'll need shoes, handbags, and accessories to match. Victoria looked like Christmas had come early. Excellent choice, Mr. Grayson. While Victoria went to arrange everything, Emily cornered Ethan near a display of scarves that probably cost more than her monthly Metro North pass. This is insane, she hissed. Do you have any idea how much money you just spent? It's not about the money, Ethan said. Easy for you to say when you have enough to buy a small island. Ethan studied her for a moment. You're right, I'm sorry. I don't think about money the way most people do, and that was insensitive. Emily blinked. She hadn't expected him to actually apologize. But here's the thing, Ethan continued. This isn't just about fooling Sophia and her father. If we're going to pull this off, you need to feel confident, and confidence is a lot easier to fake when you're not worried about whether your outfit is giving you away. Emily considered this. It was manipulative, but it wasn't wrong. She had felt different in that navy dress, straighter posture, steadier voice, more direct eye contact. Fine, she said, but we're setting some ground rules. I'm listening. First, No more surprise shopping trips without discussing it first. Second, I want to know the total cost of everything, and we're going to work out a payment plan. Emily, I mean it, Ethan. I won't be anyone's charity case. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it as an equal partner, not as some project you're dressing up for your amusement. Something shifted in Ethan's expression. Respect, maybe. Deal, he said. What's the third rule? Third rule. You said ground rules. Plural. What's the third one? Emily hadn't actually thought of a third rule, but she was on a roll. Third, you have to teach me about your world. Really teach me. Not just what fork to use, but who these people are, what they care about, how they think. If I'm going to convince them I belong in your life, I need to understand what your life actually looks like. Ethan nodded slowly. That's fair, but it goes both ways. What do you mean? I mean, if I'm going to teach you about my world, you have to teach me about yours. If we're supposed to be engaged, I should know more about you than just your name and where you went to school. Emily felt a flutter of panic. Her world was so ordinary compared to his. What could possibly interest Ethan Grayson about her life in Queens? Her parents' struggles, her student loans, shared apartments with roommates who left dirty dishes in the sink. Trust me, she said. My world isn't nearly as interesting as yours. I'll be the judge of that, Ethan said. Besides, Sophia's going to ask me personal questions about you. How we met was just the beginning. She'll want to know your favorite foods, your pet peeves, what you do for fun. If I don't know those things, she'll figure out we're lying faster than you can say prenup. Emily's stomach dropped. Prenup? Ethan's face went slightly pale. Right about that. We should probably discuss what people are going to expect, Mr. Grayson. Victoria reappeared with several garment bags and boxes. Everything is ready for you. Perfect, Ethan said, looking relieved at the interruption. Emily, why don't you change back into your clothes, and we'll head to lunch. We have a lot to talk about. As Emily went back to the dressing room to change out of the last outfit she'd tried on, a cashmere sweater and designer jeans that made her feel like a completely different person, she caught her reflection in the mirror. Who was this woman staring back at her? 2 days ago, her biggest worry was whether she could afford to replace her broken laptop. Now, she was getting a wardrobe makeover from one of New York's most eligible bachelors and preparing to deceive some of the city's most powerful people. She thought about calling her best friend Sarah to talk through this insanity, but what would she even say? Hey, remember how I've been complaining about my dead-end job? Well, funny story. No, she was in this alone, at least for now. When she emerged from the dressing room in her original clothes, she felt like Cinderella after midnight. Ethan was waiting with enough shopping bags to stock a small boutique. Ready for lunch? He asked. Where are we going? Somewhere we can talk without being interrupted, Ethan said. And somewhere you can practice being my fiancé without an audience. As they walked toward the exit, Emily realized that despite her nerves, despite the insanity of the situation, despite the fact that she was way out of her depth, she was actually looking forward to it, which was probably the most dangerous thing of all. Nougatine, Midtown Manhattan, 1:30 p.m. The hostess at Nougatine treated Ethan like visiting royalty, leading them to a corner table with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Emily tried not to gawk at the sleek interior, the perfectly arranged sushi bar, or the fact that she could probably live for a month on what one meal here cost. Mr. Grayson, your usual table. The hostess said with a bow that seemed genuinely respectful rather than obsequious. Chef Tanaka wanted me to tell you that he has fresh bluefin today, flown in this morning from Tokyo. Please give Chef Tanaka my regards, Ethan replied, pulling out Emily's chair for her, and tell him we'll trust his judgment for our selections today. As the hostess glided away, Emily stared at Ethan. You have a usual table, and the chef personally sends you messages. Ethan had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I eat here often, and I may have invested in Tanaka's new restaurant concept last year. Of course you did, Emily muttered, then caught herself. Sorry, I don't mean to sound bitter. It's just, this is all very overwhelming. I can imagine, Ethan said, and surprisingly, he sounded like he actually could. Look, I know my life seems excessive from the outside. And honestly, a lot of it is. But some of it is just practical necessity when you move in certain circles. A server appeared with warm towels and poured water from a bottle that Emily was pretty sure cost more than her weekly grocery budget. She watched Ethan's easy interaction with the staff, polite, appreciative, but clearly accustomed to this level of service. "Tell me about your practical necessities," Emily said, accepting her towel with what she hoped was appropriate grace. Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Where do I even start?" "Okay, here's one. I haven't bought my own groceries in about 8 years. I have a housekeeper, Mrs. Liu, who handles all of that. She's been with my family since I was in college. She knows what I like, what I need, and she's better at it than I ever was. It's not about being lazy. It's about time management." Emily tried to imagine never setting foot in a grocery store, never wandering the aisles at 11 p.m. because you forgot you were out of milk, never comparing prices or clipping coupons or calculating whether you could afford the name-brand pasta this week. "What else?" she asked. "I have a driver, Daniel, who's been with Grayson Enterprises for 15 years. I could drive myself most places, but when I'm being driven, I can work, make calls, review contracts. Plus, parking in Manhattan is a nightmare, even when you can afford it." The first course arrived, delicate pieces of sashimi arranged like edible art. Emily watched Ethan pick up his chopsticks with practiced ease and tried to mirror his movements without dropping anything. "I have a personal assistant, Lauren, who manages my calendar, screens my calls, handles my travel arrangements. I have a trainer who comes to my home gym 3 times a week, not because I'm vain, but because staying in shape is basically a requirement in my industry. Looking successful is part of being successful." Emily managed to get a piece of yellowtail to her mouth without incident. It was, she had to admit, the best fish she'd ever tasted. "That sounds exhausting." "It can be," Ethan admitted. "But it's the only life I've ever known. My grandfather built Grayson Enterprises from nothing. My father expanded it. Now it's my turn. And there are a lot of people depending on me to not screw it up." "How many people work for Grayson Enterprises directly?" "About 1,200. But if you count all our contractors, suppliers, and the businesses that depend on our partnerships." Ethan paused as if he'd never calculated it before. "Probably closer to 10,000. Emily nearly choked on her sake. 10,000 people? "It's not something I think about every day," Ethan said quickly. "But yeah, when I make decisions, big ones, like whether to expand into a new market or close an underperforming division, it affects a lot of lives." The weight of that responsibility settled over Emily like a heavy blanket. She'd spent so long thinking of Ethan as just another privileged rich boy that she hadn't considered the actual burden he carried. "Is that why you lied about being engaged?" she asked. "Because of the business pressure?" Ethan's laugh was rueful. "Partly. Charles Langley controls 3 major hotel chains on the East Coast. If Grayson Enterprises can secure exclusive partnerships with them, it would mean massive expansion opportunities. But Langley is old school. He believes in doing business with family men, people he considers stable and trustworthy, and being single makes you seem unstable. Being single at 32 with a reputation for dating models and socialites makes me seem unreliable," Ethan corrected. "Like I'm not ready to settle down and build something lasting. Langley's generation equates marriage with maturity." Emily absorbed this. "So you thought if you claimed to be engaged, he'd take you more seriously as a business partner?" "Exactly. And it worked until Sophia showed up demanding to meet my mysterious fiancé." The next course arrived, perfectly prepared sea urchin that Emily approached with considerably more caution than the yellowtail. Ethan noticed her hesitation. "You don't have to eat anything you don't want to," he said gently. "I should have asked about food preferences before ordering." "No, it's fine. I'm not used to food that costs more than my monthly Metro card." Emily took a small bite and was surprised by the creamy, oceanic flavor. "Actually, that's not terrible." "Your turn," Ethan said. "Tell me about your practical necessities." Emily laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. "Where do I start? I share a 2-bedroom apartment in Astoria with my roommate Sarah because neither of us can afford to live alone in the city. I take the subway everywhere because I don't own a car, can't afford one, and know where to park it anyway. I buy generic brand everything at the grocery store, and I meal prep on Sundays so I don't waste money eating out during the week." Ethan listened without interrupting, his expression serious. "I work 3 different jobs," Emily continued. The corporate events thing, which is really just high-end catering with a fancy title. I also tutor kids in math and economics online, and I pick up freelance bookkeeping work for small businesses. Last month, I made about $3,800 total, and after rent, student loans, groceries, and transportation, I had maybe $400 left over. $400, Ethan's voice was quiet. $400, Emily confirmed, which goes into my emergency fund because the last time I didn't have an emergency fund, I ended up eating ramen for 2 weeks when my laptop died, and I couldn't afford to fix it and pay rent in the same month. Ethan set down his chopsticks. Emily, I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me, Emily said quickly. I'm telling you because you wanted to know about my world. This is what it looks like for most people my age. We're educated, we work hard, but we're basically one major expense away from financial disaster at any given time. Is that why you agreed to this insane arrangement? Ethan asked. The money? Emily considered the question seriously. Partly, she admitted. But honestly, I was also curious. When am I ever going to get another chance to see how the other half lives? To wear clothes that cost more than my monthly salary and eat at restaurants I've only read about in magazines? And what? How does it feel, living like the other half? Emily looked around the restaurant, at the other diners who clearly belonged in this rarefied world, at the waitstaff who moved with practiced precision, at Ethan himself, who commanded respect simply by existing. Terrifying, she said honestly, but also intoxicating. I felt different in those clothes this morning, more confident, like I could handle anything. I've never felt that way before. You should feel that way all the time, Ethan said, and there was something intense in his voice that made Emily's pulse quicken. Confidence isn't about what you're wearing or where you're eating. It's about knowing your worth. Easy to say when your worth is literally in the billions. That's not what I meant. Ethan leaned forward, his blue eyes fixed on hers. Emily, in the past 24 hours, you've handled being thrust into a completely foreign situation with more grace and intelligence than most people I know would have managed. You set boundaries with me this morning when you could have just gone along with whatever I wanted. You're quick thinking, funny, honest, and brave enough to take on a challenge that would send most people running. Emily felt heat rise in her cheeks. You barely know me. I know enough, Ethan said. I know you're nothing like the women I usually spend time with. There was something in the way he said it that made Emily's stomach flutter. What are the women you usually spend time with like? Ethan was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how honest to be. Predictable, he said finally. They want the same things: expensive dinners, designer clothes, vacations in exotic locations, access to exclusive events. They're perfectly pleasant, but they're not challenging. Challenging? They don't push back. They don't question anything. They don't make me think about things differently. Ethan's gaze met hers again. You've made me think more in one day than I have in months. Emily didn't know what to say to that. The intensity of his attention was both thrilling and terrifying. She was saved from having to respond by the arrival of their main course. Perfectly grilled fish with vegetables she couldn't identify, but that tasted incredible. Your turn to ask me something, Ethan said, apparently sensing her need to change the subject. Okay, Emily said, grateful for the reprieve. What's the worst part about being you? Ethan blinked, clearly not expecting that question. The worst part? Yeah. Everyone always focuses on the money and the power and the glamorous lifestyle, but what's the downside? Ethan was quiet for so long that Emily began to think he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it before. The loneliness, he said. It sounds ridiculous, I know. I'm surrounded by people all the time, but most of them want something from me: a business deal, an investment, an introduction, an invitation. It's rare to meet someone who's interested in me as a person rather than as Ethan Grayson, CEO. That's not ridiculous, Emily said quietly. That sounds awful. It is, sometimes. And the pressure. People think having money means you don't have problems. But the problems just change. Every decision I make affects hundreds of people. Every relationship I have gets scrutinized by the press. Every mistake I make gets magnified and analyzed and used against me. Emily thought about her own problems: student loans, cramped apartment, uncertainty about the future, and realized that while they were difficult, they were also fundamentally private. No one was watching her every move, judging her every decision, waiting for her to fail. "Is that why you've never been married?" she asked. "Because you can't trust people's motives?" Ethan's smile was rueful. "Partly, but also because I've never met anyone who made me want to take that risk." The way he was looking at her when he said it made Emily's heart skip a beat. She took a large gulp of sake to cover her confusion. "Okay, my turn again," Ethan said. "What's your biggest dream? If money wasn't an object, what would you do with your life?" Emily didn't hesitate. "I'd start my own business. Event planning, but real event planning. Not just serving drinks at other people's parties. I'd specialize in weddings and corporate retreats. Maybe expand into destination events. I have a whole business plan worked out. I've been refining it for 3 years. What's stopping you?" "Startup capital," Emily said simply. "I'd need at least $50,000 to get started properly. Business license, insurance, initial marketing, equipment, enough runway to survive the first year while I build a client base. I've got about $8,000 saved up." "$50,000 isn't that much," Ethan said thoughtfully. Emily laughed. "Easy for you to say. For me, it might as well be $50 million. Have you considered investors? Who's going to invest in someone with no track record and no connections?" Emily shook her head. "I'll get there eventually. It'll just take longer than I'd like." Ethan was studying her with that intense expression again. "Tell me about your business plan." For the next hour, as they worked their way through the rest of their meal, Emily found herself explaining her vision in detail. Ethan asked smart questions, offered suggestions, and seemed genuinely interested in her ideas. It was the first time in years that someone had taken her professional aspirations seriously, and she found herself talking more openly than she had with anyone in months. "You've really thought this through," Ethan said when she finished. "Have you considered starting smaller? Maybe handling events for smaller companies, building a reputation that way?" "I've tried," Emily admitted. "But most small businesses either handle their own events or they can't afford professional planning. And the bigger companies already have relationships with established firms. It's a catch-22. I need experience to get clients, but I need clients to get experience. What if I could help with that?" Emily's stomach dropped. "Ethan, no. I told you I'm not a charity case. That's not what I'm suggesting," Ethan said quickly. "I'm talking about a legitimate business opportunity. Grayson Enterprises hosts dozens of events every year: board meetings, client dinners, product launches, holiday parties. We usually hire outside firms to handle the planning." Emily stared at him. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a chance to prove yourself," Ethan corrected. "We have a client appreciation dinner coming up in 2 weeks. Nothing huge, about 50 people, but high profile. If you can pull that off successfully, I'd be happy to recommend you to other companies in our network." Emily's heart was racing. This was exactly the kind of opportunity she'd been dreaming of, but the timing couldn't be worse. "Ethan, I can't accept that kind of favor from you. Not while whatever this is, we're doing. Why not?" "Because it compromises everything. If people find out about our arrangement, they'll assume any business success I have is because I'm sleeping with you." "Are you sleeping with me?" Ethan asked, and there was something in his voice that made Emily's cheeks burn. "You know what I mean," she said quickly. "People will assume. Then we don't tell them," Ethan said simply. "As far as anyone knows, Emily Carter, event planner extraordinaire, submitted a proposal and won the contract on her merits." Emily wanted to say yes more than she'd ever wanted anything in her life, but accepting felt like crossing a line she wasn't sure she could uncross. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Fair enough," Ethan said. "But Emily, you're good at this, really good. Don't let fear hold you back from something you've earned." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of their respective revelations settling between them. Emily realized that somewhere between the sashimi and the sea urchin, Ethan had stopped being just a client to her. He'd become... she wasn't sure what. Not a friend exactly, but not a stranger either. Someone dangerous. "So," Ethan said, breaking the silence, Ready for your next lesson in being my fiancé? What's next? Ethan's grin was almost wicked. Shopping for an engagement ring. Emily nearly choked on her water. I'm sorry. What? Think about it, Ethan said reasonably. Sophia's going to expect to see a ring, probably a very expensive ring, knowing her expectations. Ethan, I can't wear some priceless piece of jewelry around the city. What if I lose it? What if I get mugged? We'll get insurance, Ethan said dismissively. Besides, if we're going to convince people we're engaged, we need to look the part. As they left the restaurant, Ethan's hand settling naturally on the small of her back as he guided her toward the street, Emily realized that this fake engagement was becoming more real by the hour, and that was absolutely the most terrifying thing of all. The black Tesla was waiting at the curb, and as Ethan opened her door, Emily caught her reflection in the window. For just a moment, she looked like the kind of woman who belonged in Ethan Grayson's world. The question was, did she want to? Tiffany and Company, 5th Avenue, 3:45 p.m. Emily had walked past Tiffany and Company hundreds of times during her years in New York, but she'd never actually set foot inside. The iconic blue boxes in the windows were like artifacts from another world, beautiful, untouchable, and completely beyond her reach. Now, as Ethan held the heavy glass door open for her, she felt like an imposter about to be exposed at any moment. The interior was exactly what she'd imagined. Pristine white cases filled with sparkling treasures, soft lighting that made everything glow like captured starlight, and an atmosphere of hushed reverence that made her want to whisper. The salespeople moved with the practiced grace of ballet dancers, each one impeccably dressed and radiating the kind of confidence that came from handling objects worth more than most people's annual salaries. Mr. Grayson, a distinguished man with silver hair and kind eyes, approached them immediately. What a wonderful surprise. How may we assist you today? Hello, Michael, Ethan replied warmly. I'd like you to meet my fiancée, Emily Carter. We're looking for an engagement ring. Michael's professional smile became genuinely warm as he turned to Emily. Miss Carter, congratulations. This is such an exciting moment. Please come with me to our private viewing room, where we can give you our full attention. As they followed Michael through the store, Emily caught glimpses of price tags that made her stomach clench. A simple tennis bracelet cost more than her parents' mortgage. A pair of diamond earrings was priced higher than her student loans. She was definitely in over her head. The private viewing room was an oasis of cream-colored leather and soft lighting, with a large mirror and comfortable seating that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Michael gestured for them to sit while he disappeared to gather options. Are you okay? Ethan asked quietly, noticing her deer in headlights expression. You look like you're about to bolt. I might, Emily admitted. Ethan, I can't wear something that costs more than a house. What if something happens to it? Nothing will happen to it, Ethan said firmly, and even if something did, that's what insurance is for. You keep saying that, but I've never owned anything valuable enough to insure. I don't even have renter's insurance. Ethan looked genuinely shocked. You don't have renter's insurance? It's another monthly expense I can't really afford, Emily said defensively. I'm careful with my stuff. We're getting you renter's insurance, Ethan said immediately. Ethan, it's not charity. It's common sense. What if there's a fire, a break-in? You'd lose everything. Before Emily could argue further, Michael returned with several black velvet trays that he set on the table with ceremonial care. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Even in the soft lighting, the diamonds blazed with an inner fire that seemed almost alive. Now, Michael said, settling into his chair with obvious relish, let's talk about what speaks to you. Do you prefer classic elegance, vintage glamour, or something more contemporary? Emily stared at the array of rings, each one more stunning than the last. I honestly don't know. I've never really thought about engagement rings before. That's perfectly normal, Michael assured her. Many brides-to-be are overwhelmed by the choices. Perhaps we could start with some basics. What's your lifestyle like? Are you very active? Do you work with your hands? I work in event planning, Emily said, falling back on their established cover story. So, I need something that won't snag on fabric or get in the way when I'm setting up venues. Excellent. That suggests something with a lower profile, perhaps a bezel or channel setting. Michael lifted a ring from the first tray. This is a classic solitaire in a platinum setting. 2 carats, excellent cut. VVS, one clarity. He slipped it onto Emily's finger, and she stared in wonder. The diamond caught the light and threw it back in rainbow fragments that danced across the walls. It was beautiful, but it was also massive, the kind of ring that screamed, "Look at me!" from across a room. "It's stunning," Emily said diplomatically, "but maybe a little large for everyday wear." Ethan was studying her hand with an unreadable expression. "What do you think?" Michael asked him. "I think Emily should choose what makes her feel comfortable," Ethan said, which was exactly the right answer but somehow felt disappointing. Michael showed them ring after ring, a vintage, inspired setting with smaller diamonds surrounding a central stone, a modern design with a diamond set in a twisted band, an emerald-cut stone in an Art Deco setting that looked like it belonged in a 1,920 seconds movie. Each one was more beautiful than the last, and Emily found herself genuinely torn between several options. "You know," Michael said thoughtfully, "we have one more option that might interest you. It's not part of our regular collection." He disappeared again and returned with a single ring in a simple box. The ring was perfect in its simplicity. A round, brilliant diamond, perhaps a carat and a half, set in a delicate platinum band with tiny diamonds nestled along the sides. It was elegant without being ostentatious, classic without being boring, sophisticated without being intimidating. "Oh," Emily breathed as Michael slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. "The center stone is 1.3 carats, Michael explained. "Excellent cut, D color, FL. Clarity essentially flawless. The setting is platinum with 24 accent diamonds totaling about half a carat. It's actually from our custom collection. It was made for another client who changed her mind about the setting." Emily couldn't stop staring at her hand. The ring felt substantial but not heavy. Noticeable, but not overwhelming. It was the kind of ring she would have chosen for herself if she lived in a world where such choices were possible. "What do you think?" Ethan asked, and when Emily looked up, she was surprised by the intensity in his expression. "I think it's perfect," she said honestly. "Then that's the one," Ethan said immediately. "Wonderful choice," Michael beamed. "Let me just verify the size. Yes, it's a perfect fit. Shall I wrap this up for you?" "Actually," Ethan said, "she'll wear it out." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Wearing it out made this feel suddenly, impossibly real. "Ethan, are you sure?" What if nothing?" Ethan said firmly. "You're my fiancé. You should be wearing your engagement ring." Michael began explaining the insurance policy and care instructions, while Emily sat in a daze, staring at the ring on her finger. The diamond caught the light every time she moved her hand, sending sparks of fire across the room. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever owned, and it wasn't even really hers. "The total comes to $68,000, Michael said as Ethan handed over his black American Express card without even glancing at the price. Emily felt faint. $68,000. Her parents' combined annual income was barely twice that. Ethan had just spent more on a piece of jewelry than most people spent on cars. "Insurance information will be sent to your office tomorrow," Michael continued. "And of course, if you need any adjustments or have any concerns, please don't hesitate to call." As they prepared to leave, Emily caught sight of herself in one of the mirrors. The ring transformed her entire hand, making her fingers look more elegant, her nails look more polished, her gestures more graceful. It was amazing how one piece of jewelry could change so much. "Thank you, Michael," Ethan said, shaking the older man's hand. "As always, exceptional service." "My pleasure, Mr. Grayson. And Miss Carter, congratulations again. You've chosen a truly exquisite ring." Outside on Fifth Avenue, Emily felt like she was walking in a dream. The ring caught the late afternoon sunlight and threw rainbows onto the sidewalk. People passing by noticed it. She caught several women glancing at her hand with obvious envy. "How are you feeling?" Ethan asked as they walked toward his car. "Terrified," Emily admitted. "I'm wearing more money than I've ever seen in one place. What if someone tries to mug me?" "No one's going to mug you," Ethan said, but he moved protectively closer to her side. "Besides, you need to get used to wearing expensive jewelry. Sophia will definitely notice if your engagement ring doesn't meet her standards." They settled into the Tesla, and Ethan pulled into traffic with the easy confidence of someone who'd never had to worry about parking tickets or tow zones. Emily couldn't stop looking at the ring on her finger, turning her hand to catch the light streaming through the windows. "Can I ask you something?" Emily said as they stopped at a red light. "Of course." "Why didn't you ever give a ring like this to someone for real? I mean, you must have had serious relationships before." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. "I've had relationships," he said finally, "but nothing that felt lasting. Nothing that felt worth risking everything for." "What do you mean, risking everything?" "Marriage, especially in my position, isn't just about two people," Ethan explained. "It's about merging lives, families, business interests. A divorce could cost me half my company, and that company employs thousands of people. I couldn't take that risk unless I was absolutely certain." Emily processed this. "So, you've never been in love? Really in love?" Ethan glanced at her, something unreadable flickering in his expression. "I thought I was, once. Her name was Olivia. We dated for 2 years. What happened? I found out she was feeding information about my business deals to her ex-boyfriend, who happened to work for one of my biggest competitors," Ethan said flatly. "She wasn't interested in me. She was interested in insider trading profits." "That's horrible," Emily said softly. "I'm sorry." "It was a good lesson," Ethan said, but she could hear the old hurt in his voice. "It taught me to be more careful about who I trust." They drove in comfortable silence for a while, Manhattan streaming past the windows in a blur of glass and steel. Emily found herself wondering what it would be like to really be engaged to Ethan Grayson, to have this ring represent something real instead of an elaborate charade. "Where are we going now?" she asked as Ethan turned onto the FDR Drive. "My place," Ethan said. "If we're going to the Hamptons this weekend, you need to see how I live. Plus, we should probably practice couple things." Emily's stomach did a little flip. "Couple things?" "Holding hands without looking awkward. Casual touches. The way couples interact when they're comfortable with each other," Ethan explained. But there was something in his tone that suggested he was as nervous about this as she was. "Sophia will be watching for signs that we're faking." "Right," Emily said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Practicing. That makes sense." Ethan lived in a penthouse on the Upper East Side, which Emily should have expected but somehow hadn't prepared herself for. The building was one of those pre-war monuments to wealth and privilege, with a doorman who greeted Ethan by name and an elevator that required a key to access the top floor. "Mr. Grayson," the doorman said with genuine warmth. "Good afternoon. And congratulations on your engagement. The news is all over page 6 today." Emily's blood turned to ice. "Page 6. Thank you, Robert," Ethan said smoothly. "Emily, this is Robert Thompson. He's been taking care of this building for 15 years. Robert, my fiancée, Emily Carter." "A pleasure to meet you, Miss Carter," Robert said with a courtly bow. "We're all very excited to have a future Mrs. Grayson in the building." In the elevator, Emily grabbed Ethan's arm. "Page 6. We're in page 6? Relax," Ethan said, but she noticed he was checking his phone. "It's probably just a brief mention. Sophia or someone at the party last night must have called it in." The elevator opened directly into Ethan's penthouse, and Emily's jaw dropped. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, filling the space with golden afternoon light. The furniture was modern but comfortable, expensive but not ostentatious. Art that she suspected was original hung on the walls, and everything was arranged with the kind of casual perfection that took serious money to achieve. "This is—" Emily started, then stopped. "You live here alone?" "Most of the time," Ethan said, setting his keys on a table that was probably worth more than her car. "Sometimes I have business associates stay in the guest room when they're in town." Emily walked to the windows, staring out at the park spread below them like a green carpet. "The view is incredible. It's one of the reasons I bought the place," Ethan said, joining her at the window. "I grew up in Connecticut, and I missed having green space nearby." "Where in Connecticut?" "Greenwich. My parents still live there." Ethan's expression grew complicated. "Actually, that's something we should probably discuss. They're going to want to meet you, especially once this engagement news spreads." Emily felt another wave of panic. "Your parents?" "Don't worry," Ethan said quickly. "They're not like the Langleys. My mother is actually lovely. She used to be a teacher before she married my father, and my dad, despite being a successful businessman, is pretty down to earth. Ethan, I can't meet your parents, Emily said desperately. What if they ask about my family, my background? What if they want to plan a wedding? We'll handle it when it comes up, Ethan said, but he looked concerned. For now, let's focus on this weekend and the Langley dinner. Ethan showed her around the apartment, the gourmet kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine, the library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the master bedroom with a view of the city that probably never got old. Everything was beautiful and perfect and completely intimidating. Can I get you something to drink? Ethan asked as they settled in the living room. Wine? Coffee? Water? Wine sounds good, Emily said, needing something to calm her nerves. Ethan disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a bottle of red wine that probably cost more than her monthly Metro North pass. As he opened it with practiced ease, Emily studied him in his natural environment. He moved with confidence here, clearly comfortable in this space that he'd created for himself. So, Ethan said, handing her a glass, ready for your first lesson in being my fiancé? Emily took a large gulp of wine, which was admittedly the best wine she'd ever tasted, and tried to look braver than she felt. What did you have in mind? Well, Ethan said, settling onto the couch beside her, closer than he'd sat before, engaged couples are comfortable with casual physical contact. They sit close together. They touch each other without thinking about it. Emily was hyper-aware of the warmth radiating from his body, the subtle scent of his cologne, the way his presence seemed to fill the space around her. Okay, she said, her voice slightly breathless. Ethan reached over and took her hand, the one wearing the engagement ring, and intertwined their fingers. Like this, he said softly, natural, comfortable. Emily stared down at their joined hands. His was larger than hers, with long fingers and calluses that suggested he did more than just sit behind a desk all day. The contrast between his hand and the delicate ring on her finger was somehow incredibly intimate. This feels... She started, then stopped. Feels what? Ethan asked, and when she looked up, she realized he was much closer than she'd thought. Real, Emily whispered. Something shifted in Ethan's expression, an intensity that made her pulse quicken. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, and the terrifying part was that she wanted him to. Instead, he cleared his throat and leaned back slightly. Good, he said, his voice rougher than usual. That's exactly what we're going for. Emily's phone buzzed with a text, breaking the spell. She glanced at it and felt her stomach drop. What is it? Ethan asked, noticing her expression. Emily showed him the phone. The text was from her roommate, Sarah. Girl, you need to call me right now. You're in the gossip blogs, and my phone is blowing up with people asking if you're really engaged to Ethan Grayson. How do people even know who I am? Emily asked weakly. Ethan was already pulling up page 6 on his phone. His expression grew grim as he read. They have your name, your age, and the fact that you work in corporate events. Someone did their homework fast. What does that mean? It means, Ethan said slowly, that our little charade just became a lot more public than we planned. Emily's phone rang. The caller ID showed her mother's number. Oh no, Emily breathed. My parents are going to see this. Answer it, Ethan said gently. Tell them you'll call them back later to explain everything. Emily answered the phone with shaking hands. Hi, Mom. Emily Jane Carter. Her mother's voice came through loud and clear. You had better start explaining why Mrs. Lopez from next door just called to tell me my daughter is engaged to a billionaire, and it's all over the internet. Emily closed her eyes. Mom, I can explain, but... Are you pregnant? Her mother interrupted. Is that why you're rushing into marriage with someone we've never met? I'm not pregnant, Mom, Emily said quickly. And we're not rushing into anything. I need to call you back later, okay? I promise I'll explain everything. Emily, I love you, Mom. I'll call you tonight. Emily hung up before her mother could protest further. Ethan was watching her with sympathy. How bad was it? She thinks I'm pregnant, Emily said miserably. And she's probably calling my dad right now, and he's probably having a heart attack because his little girl is marrying someone rich enough to be featured in Forbes. What do you want to do? Ethan asked. Emily looked around his penthouse, at the engagement ring on her finger, at the man who had somehow become the center of a storm she wasn't sure she could weather. 24 hours ago, her biggest problem had been whether she could afford to replace her broken laptop. Now she was fake engaged to one of New York's most eligible bachelors. Her face was probably all over social media, and her parents thought she was pregnant. I want, Emily said slowly, another glass of that wine, and then I want you to teach me everything I need to know to survive dinner with the Langleys without humiliating both of us. Ethan smiled, and for the first time since this whole insane adventure began, Emily thought she might actually be able to pull it off. Deal, Ethan said, refilling her glass. But first, we need to come up with a story for your parents, because if they're anything like mine, they're going to want to meet me very soon. Emily groaned and buried her face in her hands. The engagement ring caught the light even in that position, reminding her that there was no going back now. She was in this completely, whether she was ready or not. Ethan's penthouse, later that evening. The wine had helped, but not enough. Emily sat curled up on Ethan's impossibly comfortable couch, her phone silenced after the 15th call from numbers she didn't recognize. Apparently, news of Ethan Grayson's engagement was bigger than either of them had anticipated. How are you holding up? Ethan asked, settling beside her with his own glass of wine. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, making him look more human and somehow more dangerous at the same time. I've been better, Emily admitted, unconsciously twisting the engagement ring around her finger. My phone has been ringing non-stop. Sarah is freaking out. My parents are confused and worried. And apparently, 3 different gossip blogs want exclusive interviews about our whirlwind romance. Ethan winced. I'm sorry. I should have anticipated this. When you're in the public eye, even small news becomes big news very quickly. Small news? Emily laughed. But there wasn't much humor in it. Ethan, I'm nobody. I serve drinks at parties and tutor teenagers in algebra. Why does anyone care who you're marrying? Because, Ethan said carefully, most people in my position marry within their social circle. The media loves a Cinderella story, even when it's not real. The irony wasn't lost on Emily. If only they knew how close to the truth that actually was. Speaking of not real, Emily said, we need to figure out what we're going to tell people when they ask for details. Your assistant called while you were in the kitchen. Apparently, 3 different magazines want to do engagement photo shoots, and someone from the Today Show wants to interview us next week. Ethan nearly choked on his wine. The Today Show? That's what Lauren said. She's been fielding calls all afternoon. Emily pulled up the notes she'd taken on her phone. Also, your mother called. She wants to have lunch tomorrow to get to know her future daughter-in-law, and your father wants to take us both to dinner this weekend, to celebrate. This is getting complicated very quickly, Ethan muttered, running his hand through his hair. Complicated? Emily stood up and began pacing around his living room, nervous energy making it impossible to sit still. Ethan, this is spiraling completely out of control. We agreed to fool Sophia Langley for one dinner. Now half of New York thinks we're getting married, your parents want to meet me, and the national media wants to interview us about our fake relationship. Ethan watched her pace, his expression thoughtful. What if we didn't fake it? Emily stopped mid-stride. What? What if we didn't fake it? Ethan repeated, standing up to face her. What if we actually gave this a real try? Emily stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. Are you serious right now? Think about it, Ethan said, stepping closer. We get along well. We're attracted to each other. Don't try to deny it. I felt the chemistry earlier when we were practicing couple behavior. We could help each other. Help each other? How? I get a fiancé who isn't after my money. Someone intelligent and genuine who challenges me. You get financial security, access to the kind of networking opportunities that could launch your business, and you never have to worry about student loans or rent again. Emily felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. You're talking about a business arrangement. I'm talking about a partnership, Ethan corrected. Emily, I've learned more about myself in the past 2 days than I have in the past 2 years. You make me think differently, feel differently. Maybe that's worth exploring. Ethan, Emily's voice was barely a whisper, you don't even know me. Not really. Then let me know you, Ethan said, reaching for her hands. Really know you. We're supposed to spend the weekend together anyway. What if we use that time to figure out if this could actually work? Emily's mind was reeling. The rational part of her brain was screaming that this was insane. You didn't marry someone you'd known for 2 days, no matter how attractive or successful they were. But another part of her, a part she didn't entirely trust, was intrigued by the possibility. What about love? She asked quietly. Ethan's hands tightened on hers. What about it? Don't you want to marry someone you love? Someone who loves you back? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. I used to think love was essential, he said finally, but I've seen too many marriages built on love fall apart when reality set in. Compatibility, respect, mutual benefit, those things last. Love can fade. Emily felt something crack inside her chest. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. It's practical, Ethan said, but his voice lacked conviction. It's heartbreaking, Emily corrected. Ethan, somewhere out there is a woman who will love you for exactly who you are, not what you can provide. Don't you want to find her? Ethan's laugh was bitter. I thought I had remembered Olivia. I was ready to propose, ready to build a life with her. Look how that turned out. So, one bad relationship means you give up on love entirely? It means I learned to be realistic about what's actually sustainable, Ethan said. Emily, I'm offering you something real. Security, opportunity, a chance to build the life you want, without struggling for every dollar. Emily pulled her hands free and walked to the windows, staring out at the twinkling lights of the city below. It was a tempting offer, more tempting than she wanted to admit. But something about it felt wrong, like accepting would mean giving up some essential part of herself. What happens when you meet someone you actually fall in love with? She asked without turning around. What makes you think I will? Emily turned to face him. Because, despite what you think, you're not as cynical as you pretend to be. You bought me clothes today, not because you had to, but because you wanted me to feel confident. You defended me to Sophia when you could have just gone along with her snobbishness. You listened to my business ideas like they actually mattered to you. Ethan's expression was unreadable. Maybe they do matter to me. Maybe they do, Emily agreed. But that's not the same as love, Ethan. And someday, when you meet someone who makes your heart race just by walking into a room, who makes you laugh without trying, who makes you want to be a better person just because they exist in your world, what happens to our practical arrangement then? Ethan didn't answer, but something flickered in his eyes that suggested her words had hit their mark. Emily's phone rang again. This time it was her father, and she knew she couldn't avoid it any longer. I need to take this, she said, accepting the call. Hi, Dad. Emily. Her father's voice was carefully controlled, which was somehow worse than if he'd been yelling. Your mother tells me you're engaged to someone we've never met. Dad, I can explain. I'm sure you can. But first I want you to tell me the truth. Are you in some kind of trouble? Do you need help? Emily's throat tightened. Her father had always been her protector, the one who'd worked double shifts to pay for her college, who'd driven to the city in his ancient pickup truck whenever she needed help moving or had a crisis. The idea that he thought she might be in danger and hadn't told him was clearly killing him. I'm not in trouble, Dad, she said softly. I'm figuring some things out. Does this man treat you well? Her father asked. Because if he doesn't, money or no money, He treats me very well, Emily said, glancing at Ethan, who was pretending not to listen while obviously hanging on every word. He's a good man. When do we get to meet him? Her father asked. Because your mother is already planning a dinner, and you know how she gets when she has a project. Emily closed her eyes. Soon, Dad, I promise. But right now things are a little crazy with work and wedding planning. It wasn't entirely a lie. Things were definitely crazy. Just promise me you're being careful, her father said. You're smart, Emily, but you've got a good heart. And sometimes that makes you trust people more than you should. I promise, Dad. I love you. Love you too, sweetheart. And Emily, if you're happy, then I'm happy. But if this man ever makes you unhappy, you call me? Understand? I understand. After she hung up, Ethan was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Your father sounds like a good man, he said quietly. He is, Emily said, He's the best man I know. He worked 2 jobs to put me through college. Never complained when I chose an expensive school. Never made me feel guilty for following my dreams instead of staying home and getting married right after high school like some of my friends did. And your mother? Emily smiled despite everything. She's wonderful too. She volunteers at the local food bank, organizes the church fundraisers, makes the best lasagna in Queens. She's going to love you, which is part of the problem. Why is that a problem? Because when this fake engagement ends, I'm going to have to break their hearts too. Emily said simply. They're going to get attached to you, to the idea of you, and then I'm going to have to explain why the wedding is off. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. What if it doesn't end? Ethan, Emily started. I'm serious, Emily. What if we actually try to make this work? What's the worst that could happen? Emily laughed. But there was no humor in it. The worst that could happen. I fall in love with you. And you realize this was all a mistake. I get my heart broken, my parents get their hearts broken, and I end up back where I started, except now I know exactly what I'm missing. Or, Ethan said, moving closer, you realize that sometimes the best relationships are built on friendship and compatibility rather than grand passion. You realize that security and partnership can be just as fulfilling as love. Do you really believe that? Emily asked. Ethan's hesitation was answer enough. Emily's phone rang again. This time it was Sarah, and Emily knew her roommate wouldn't give up until she got some answers. I should take this, Emily said. Sarah has been blowing up my phone all day. Emily! Sarah's voice was so loud that Ethan could probably hear every word. What the actual heck is going on? I come home from work, and there are reporters outside our building asking about you and Ethan Grayson. Reporters? Emily's blood ran cold. Outside our apartment? 3 of them, with cameras. Mrs. Liu from 4B is having the time of her life, giving them quotes about what a lovely, quiet girl you are. Emily closed her eyes. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to affect you. Forget about me. Are you okay? Are you safe? Because I Googled this guy, and Emily, he's like really rich and really handsome and really rich. Did I mention rich? I noticed, Emily said dryly. So, what's the story? Is this real? Are you actually engaged to a billionaire? Because if you are, I have some thoughts about the wedding menu. Emily looked at Ethan, who was watching her with those intense blue eyes that seemed to see right through her. It's complicated, Sarah. Complicated how? You're either engaged or you're not. I can't really explain over the phone. Can you stay at Tom's tonight? I'll explain everything tomorrow. I promise. Emily Jane Carter, you're scaring me. Just tell me you're safe, and this isn't some kind of pretty woman situation. I'm safe, Emily said firmly. I promise, and it's definitely not a pretty woman situation. Okay, but I'm expecting a full explanation tomorrow with details. All the details. After Emily hung up, she and Ethan sat in silence for a while. The weight of the day, the decisions, the impossible situation they'd created, pressed down on both of them. We should probably start preparing for this weekend, Ethan said finally. If we're going to pull this off, you need to know more about my background, my family, my life in the Hamptons. Emily nodded, though part of her wondered if they were just postponing the inevitable crash. Tell me about your house there. It's not huge by Hamptons standards, Ethan said, which Emily suspected meant it was still larger than any house she'd ever been in. 3 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, deck overlooking the ocean. My grandfather bought it in the 1962 when you could still get oceanfront property without selling a kidney. What do people do in the Hamptons? Emily asked. I mean, for fun. Ethan smiled, and for the first time all evening it reached his eyes. You really want to know? I really want to know. Well, there's the beach, obviously. Swimming. Surfing if you're into that. There are amazing restaurants, though most of them require reservations weeks in advance. Art galleries, wine tastings, charity events. A lot of people just relax, read books on the deck, have barbecues with friends, play tennis. Do you play tennis? Badly, Ethan admitted. But I enjoy it anyway. Do you play any sports? Emily laughed. Does running to catch the subway count? I did track in high school, but that was a long time ago. What else did you do in high school? Ethan asked, settling back on the couch. Emily curled up on the opposite end of the couch, surprised by his genuine interest. Besides track, I was in debate club, which probably explains why I'm so argumentative. I was editor of the school paper, which was about as exciting as it sounds. I worked weekends at a local diner to help pay for college applications. What was your favorite subject? Economics, Emily said without hesitation. I loved the way it explained human behavior through numbers and patterns. It made sense to me in a way that other subjects didn't. Ethan's expression was thoughtful. That's actually how I approach business decisions. Everything comes down to patterns and probability. Even relationships? Emily asked. Until recently, Ethan said quietly. They talked for another hour, sharing stories about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Emily learned that Ethan had wanted to be a marine biologist before he'd accepted his destiny in the family business. Ethan learned that Emily had once considered law school but had been deterred by the cost and the competitive culture. I should probably head home, Emily said when she noticed it was nearly 10. Early morning tomorrow, and I still need to figure out what to tell my parents. Stay, Ethan said suddenly. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Stay? In the guest room, Ethan clarified quickly, though his cheeks were slightly flushed. It's late, and with reporters potentially watching your building, it might be easier if you stayed here tonight. Emily considered this. It was practical, she told herself. Purely practical. Okay, she said, but I'll need to borrow something to sleep in. Ethan's expression grew suddenly intense. I'll find you something. Anne. The guest room was beautiful, all cream colors and soft lighting, with a bathroom that was larger than Emily's bedroom at home. Ethan had given her one of his t-shirts to sleep in, and as she changed into it, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The shirt fell to mid-thigh, and she looked different, softer. Somehow, more vulnerable. The engagement ring caught the bathroom light, reminding her that she was playing a role in a story she wasn't sure how to end. When she emerged from the bathroom, Ethan was waiting in the hallway with fresh towels and a new toothbrush. Everything you need should be in there, he said, but his voice was rougher than usual. If you need anything else, my room is just down the hall. Thank you, Emily said softly. For all of this. I know I got you into this mess by agreeing to play along, but you've been really kind about everything. Ethan stepped closer, and Emily's pulse quickened. Emily, about what I said earlier, about trying to make this real. Ethan, I know it sounds crazy, he continued, but I can't stop thinking about how right this feels, how right you feel. Emily's breath caught. He was standing so close she could see the flecks of silver in his blue eyes, could smell the subtle scent of his cologne. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, and she wasn't sure what she would do if he did. Instead, he reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Sweet dreams, Emily. Good night, Ethan, she whispered. In the guest room, Emily lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything that had happened. 2 days ago, she'd been Emily Carter, struggling event planner with more dreams than opportunities. Now, she was Emily Carter, fake fiancée to one of New York's most eligible bachelors, wearing a ring worth more than her parents' house, and sleeping in a penthouse overlooking Central Park. The smart thing would be to end this now, before it got any more complicated, to tell Ethan that she appreciated the offer but couldn't go through with it, to give back the ring and return to her normal life before she got in too deep. But as she twisted the engagement ring around her finger, Emily realized she was already in too deep. Whether she admitted it or not, whether it was smart or not, she was falling for Ethan Grayson, and that was the most dangerous development of all. The next morning, Emily woke to the smell of coffee and something that might have been bacon. She padded to the kitchen in Ethan's t-shirt and her jeans from yesterday, finding him standing at the stove in sweatpants and a worn Georgetown t-shirt that made him look younger and more approachable. Good morning, he said, glancing over his shoulder with a smile that did things to her pulse. I hope you're hungry. You cook? Emily asked, surprised. I make a mean omelet, Ethan said proudly. It's about the extent of my culinary skills, but I've perfected it over the years. Emily accepted the cup of coffee he handed her and took a sip. It was perfect strong, but not bitter, with just a hint of cream. How did you know how I like my coffee? Lucky guess, Ethan said. But something in his expression suggested he'd been paying more attention to her preferences than she'd realized. They ate breakfast together at the island in his kitchen, the morning light streaming through the windows and making everything feel peaceful and domestic. It was easy to pretend in moments like this that they were a real couple sharing a quiet morning together. "So," Ethan said as they finished eating, "ready for your crash course in Hampton's social dynamics?" "Is there going to be a test?" Emily asked. Ethan's grin was wicked. "Oh, there's definitely going to be a test. Tonight at the Langley dinner party." Emily's stomach dropped. "Tonight? I thought that was next weekend." "Oh. Sophia called this morning while you were sleeping," Ethan said apologetically. "She moved it up. Apparently, she's dying to get to know you better." Emily buried her face in her hands. "I'm not ready for this." "Yes, you are," Ethan said firmly, reaching across the island to take her hands. "Emily, you're smart, funny, graceful, and more genuine than anyone in that room will be. You're going to be fine. Oh, what if I use the wrong fork? What if I say something stupid? What if they figure out that I don't belong there?" "Then they figure it out," Ethan said simply. "But I don't think they will. And even if they do, you'll handle it with the same grace you've handled everything else." Emily looked down at their joined hands, at the engagement ring that sparkled in the morning light. "Ethan, about what you said last night." "I meant it," Ethan said quietly. "All of it." Emily met his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, the hope, the vulnerability he was trying to hide. "I need time to think about it." "How much time?" "I don't know," Emily said honestly. "This weekend, maybe. After we get through the Langley dinner, and I see what your world is really like." Ethan nodded slowly. "That's fair. But Emily, whatever you decide, I want you to know that meeting you has changed something for me. You've made me remember what it feels like to be excited about the future." Emily's heart clenched. "Ethan, I know it's a lot," Ethan said quickly. "I know this whole situation is insane, but maybe the best things in life are a little insane." Before Emily could respond, Ethan's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and grimaced. "It's my mother," he said. "I should probably take this." As Ethan answered the phone and moved into the living room for privacy, Emily sat alone in his kitchen, surrounded by the trappings of a life she'd never imagined for herself. Through the windows, she could see Central Park stretching out below, filled with joggers and dog walkers and people living their normal lives. Was this what she wanted? This beautiful cage of privilege and expectation? The security was tempting, more tempting than she wanted to admit. She'd never have to worry about money again. Never have to choose between paying rent and buying groceries, never have to stress about student loans or health insurance or any of the thousand small anxieties that had plagued her adult life. But what would she be giving up in exchange? Her independence, her dreams of building something of her own, the possibility of finding real love with someone who chose her not because she was convenient, but because he couldn't imagine his life without her. Ethan returned from his phone call looking slightly shell-shocked. "Everything okay?" Emily asked. "My mother wants to have lunch with you today," Ethan said. "She's excited to meet her future daughter-in-law." Emily's stomach clenched. "Today? I tried to put her off, but you don't say no to Margaret Grayson when she's made up her mind about something," Ethan said apologetically. "She's made reservations at Le Bernardin for one." "Le Bernardin?" Emily squeaked. "Ethan, that's one of the most expensive restaurants in the city." "It's also my mother's favorite," Ethan said. "Look, I know this is a lot to ask, but she's already suspicious about why I've never mentioned you before. If we cancel lunch, she'll know something's up." Emily closed her eyes and tried to center herself. Lunch with Ethan's mother at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. Tonight, dinner with the Langleys. This weekend, the Hamptons. It was like being thrown into the deep end of a pool she'd never learned to swim in. "Okay," she said finally. "But you owe me another shopping trip. I can't meet your mother wearing yesterday's clothes." Ethan's relief was visible. "Done. Bergdorf's opens at 10. We'll find you something perfect." As they prepared to leave, Emily caught sight of herself in the mirror by Ethan's front door. The engagement ring sparkled on her finger, catching the light and throwing rainbow reflections on the walls. For just a moment, she looked like the kind of woman who belonged in Ethan Grayson's world. The question was, did she want to? By the time they reached the street, Emily had made a decision. She would give this weekend really give it an honest try. She would meet Ethan's mother, survive dinner with the Langleys, spend time at his house in the Hamptons, and see what his world really felt like when she was living in it rather than just visiting. And then she would decide whether Ethan Grayson's practical proposal was worth risking her heart for. As they settled into the Tesla, Ethan reached over and took her hand. "Ready for your next adventure, fiancé?" he asked with a smile that was equal parts nervous and hopeful. Emily looked down at their joined hands, at the ring that made this all seem suddenly, impossibly real. "Ready as I'll ever be," she said. But as they pulled into Manhattan traffic, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to discover something that would change her life forever, one way or another. Epilogue. 1 year later, Central Park, New York. A perfect October morning. Emily Grayson, she was still getting used to the name, stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of their penthouse, watching the autumn leaves dance in Central Park below. The morning sun caught her wedding ring, a simple platinum band that complemented the engagement ring she'd worn for exactly 1 year and 3 days. "Coffee's ready, Mrs. Grayson," Ethan said, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind and pressing a kiss to her temple. Emily hummed contentedly, leaning back against his chest. "I still can't believe Sophia actually gave a lovely maid of honor speech at our wedding." Ethan's laugh rumbled against her back. "I think losing the Langley hotel deal was the best thing that ever happened to us. It forced Sophia to realize she wanted my father more than she wanted me." "Your father seems happy," Emily said, turning in his arms. "And Sophia's stepmother act is surprisingly convincing." "Terrifying but convincing," Ethan agreed, then grew more serious. "Any regrets about the small ceremony?" Emily smiled, thinking about their wedding 3 months ago. After the media circus died down, and they'd successfully navigated that disastrous Langley dinner where Sophia had indeed tried to expose Emily's ordinary background, only to have it backfire spectacularly when Ethan had stood up and declared his pride in marrying a woman who'd earned everything through her own merit, they decided on an intimate ceremony, just their families, a few close friends, and a justice of the peace in the garden of Ethan's parents' house in Greenwich. Emily's parents had been nervous but charmed by the Graysons, and Margaret had immediately adopted Emily's mother as her co-conspirator in spoiling their future grandchildren. "No regrets," Emily said firmly, though I'm still shocked that page 6 called it refreshingly authentic. "Speaking of authentic," Ethan said, his eyes twinkling, "how's the new business?" Emily's face lit up. Carter Events had launched 6 months ago, with Ethan as her first major client. A legitimate business arrangement that had resulted in the most successful corporate retreat Grayson Enterprises had ever hosted. Word had spread quickly through Manhattan's business circles, and Emily now had a waiting list of clients. "Lauren called this morning," Emily said excitedly. "The Thompson Foundation wants me to plan their annual gala, and the Wilsons want me to do their daughter's wedding next spring." Ethan beamed with pride. "I told you that business plan was brilliant." "Well, having a husband who believed in it didn't hurt," Emily said, stretching up to kiss him softly. Ethan's phone buzzed with a text, and he glanced at it with amusement. "Your roommate wants to know if we're still coming to brunch." Emily laughed. Sarah had never quite gotten over the surreal experience of having her ordinary roommate become Manhattan royalty overnight, but she'd adapted with characteristic enthusiasm. Her current mission was convincing Emily and Ethan to invest in her food truck business. "Tell her yes, but we're not discussing her proposal to cater Grayson Enterprises' holiday party," Emily said. "I love her, but her grilled cheese empire can wait until she perfects the recipe." "Already done," Ethan said, typing quickly. "She also says Daniel is bringing his famous pancakes." Emily's face softened. Ethan's driver had become an unexpected part of their extended family, often joining them for casual meals and offering his own brand of wisdom about marriage and life. He'd been the one to suggest they elope when the media attention became overwhelming, and he'd been the one to drive them to the courthouse for their marriage license, with a bottle of champagne waiting in the car. "Perfect," Emily said. "But first I have something for you." She walked to her desk and retrieved a manila envelope, handing it to Ethan with barely contained excitement. Ethan opened it curiously, then froze as he read the contents. "Emily, is this what I think it is?" "Congratulations, Mr. Grayson," Emily said, grinning. "You're going to be a father." Ethan stared at the ultrasound image for a long moment, then looked up at Emily with wonder and joy radiating from his face. "Really?" he whispered. "Really," Emily confirmed. "About 8 weeks along. Dr. Patel says everything looks perfect." Ethan crossed the room in 2 strides and swept Emily into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed. "I love you," he said fiercely, setting her down gently. "I love you so much it still scares me sometimes." "I love you too," Emily replied, cupping his face in her hands. "Even when you leave your ties on the bathroom counter. Even when you reorganize my bookshelf by color instead of subject." Ethan countered. "Even when you sing in the shower off-key," Emily continued. "Even when you steal my favorite coffee mug every single morning," Ethan finished. They stood there, grinning at each other like fools, surrounded by the life they'd built together from the most unlikely beginning. "You know," Emily said thoughtfully, "if someone had told me a year ago that I'd marry a man who pointed at me randomly in a crowded ballroom, I'd have had them committed." "Absolutely," Ethan agreed. "But it turns out the best love stories don't follow any rules." Ethan's smile was soft and full of promise. "No, they don't. They just require 2 people brave enough to take a chance on something real." As they prepared for brunch with their chosen family, Emily caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. She looked happy, genuinely happy, in a way she'd never imagined possible. The girl who'd served champagne at the Plaza Hotel was gone, replaced by a woman who'd discovered that sometimes the most terrifying leaps of faith led to the most beautiful landings. And if their child inherited Ethan's stubborn determination and Emily's fierce independence, plus a healthy dose of both their parents' ability to find love in the most unexpected places, well, the world had better watch out. "Ready, Mrs. Grayson?" Ethan asked, offering his arm with exaggerated formality. "Ready, Mr. Grayson," Emily replied, linking her arm through his. Together, they stepped out into their perfectly imperfect life, leaving behind the penthouse that had witnessed the beginning of their love story and heading toward a future that promised to be every bit as surprising as their beginning. After all, the best adventures always started with someone pointing at a stranger and saying, "That one." The end.